The film we'll discuss in this episode of Everyday Movie Recap is The Shawshank Redemption, released in 1994. An extremely wealthy banker, Andy Dufresne, gets arrested for the murders of his wife and her lover. The judge sentences Andy to 2 consecutive life sentences at the notorious Shawshank State Prison, a place from which no prisoner has ever successfully escaped alive. Many of the inmates in the prison have spent more time inside than they have spent outside. The outside world has changed dramatically during their prison sentences, and they are all oblivious to the life that has gone on without them outside the prison walls. Andy does not speak to anyone for a long period of time after entering Shawshank Prison. One day, he encounters Red, a prisoner who is a smuggler of illegal stuff inside the prison. Red, sentenced to life in jail like Andy informs Red that he requires a rock hammer and a large image of the actress Rita Hayworth. Red asks Andy if he intends to use that hammer to dig a tunnel in the prison, because a basic rock hammer will take him years to do so, and escaping from it is simply impossible. Andy promises Red that once the hammer arrives, he will understand. After becoming friends, Red warns Andy about a group of prisoners known as the Sisters, who have set their sights on him. Red orders a hammer at Andy's request, and when he receives it, he thinks to himself, it will take 1,000 years to make a tunnel in the prison with this hammer. Andy enjoys carving stones, and it appears that he wanted this hammer to pursue his passion. Andy had begun to blend in with the other prisoners in prison life, but one night, Andy fell into the clutches of those 3 prisoners that had filled his eyes. For 2 years, Andy endures sexual assault. Despite his ordeal, Andy never complained about it to anyone. Andy has bruises all over his body and an odd expression on his face. One day, the prison authorities select some prisoners, including Red and Andy, to fix the roof. Hadley is in charge here, and he appears to be upset. He informs his colleagues that he inherited $30,000 from his brother, but the money is useless because most of it would be taxed by the government. Andy and his friends are also paying attention to Hadley's chat. Andy then goes to Hadley and asks him whether he trusts his wife. Hadley is enraged when she hears this. He grabs Andy and drags him to the terrace's edge. But, before Hadley can throw him down, Andy informs him that the government has a provision that allows any person to give up to $60,000 to his wife in his lifetime. And there is no taxation on this money. Andy, who was a banker before his imprisonment, promises to assist Hadley in legally keeping his inherited money for free. In exchange, Andy requests that he give 3 drinks to each of his pals. The next day, we observed Andy's friends drinking beer on the balcony. This means Andy was able to assist Hadley in keeping his $30,000. A few days later, the jail authorities showed all of the detainees a movie. As Andy comes out of the room, his assailants attack him. However, this time Andy retaliates and is severely battered by his assailants. Andy sustains severe injuries and is rushed to the hospital. The authorities sentence the person who harmed Andy to 1 week in solitary detention. When he returns to his cell a week later, he finds Officer Hadley waiting for him. Hadley severely assaults him, leaving him disabled for the rest of his life. A few days later, the jail warden, Warden Norton, requested to inspect Andy's cell. However, searching the cell is merely an excuse. Officer Hadley informed him how Andy saved his $30,000. He wanted to meet Andy. Andy is holding a Bible, which the warden snatches away from him. Norton claims to believe in the Bible as well. Various actors' images, including a giant poster of Rita Hayworth, decorate Andy's prison cell. In some exceptional circumstances, the warden can tolerate it, although he normally doesn't allow it. Andy impresses Norton, so he invites him to his office and hires him as an assistant librarian. An elderly man who has been in charge of the library for many years forces Andy to work under him. Andy's workload grows as the years pass, so he hires his friend Red as his assistant. Andy's boss, the librarian, holds a knife to a man's throat one day. The government has actually reduced the librarian's term, but he refuses to leave this prison. He has been in this prison for 50 years. To him, the life inside the prison is his true life. He believes that if he kills someone, his penalty will be increased, and he will be imprisoned indefinitely. However, after Andy and Red persuade the old librarian, Brooks, to release the man, he agrees not to commit another crime. After being freed from jail, Brooks feels uncomfortable. The outer world has altered dramatically in the last 50 years. Where there was once only 1 car on the road, there is now a swarm of vehicles. Brooks is unable to cope in this fast-paced world, and he commits suicide. Following that, we see Norton launching a new program at Shawshank Prison. This program is called In Out, and it involves taking jail inmates out to work so that they can learn how to earn money through hard work. However, Norton is benefiting from cheap jail labor by undercutting skilled labor expenses and accepting bribes through this arrangement. Norton amasses a large amount of black money. Andy makes Norton business partners with someone who is not even real in order to assist Norton in laundering his dirty money. They forge paperwork in Randall Stevens' name and transfer all funds to his account. As a result, if the police find out about this, they will be hunting for a man who was never born in this world. Following that, we witnessed a new prisoner named Tommy enter the facility. He has visited numerous regions, but when he discovers that Andy has assisted many people here, he approaches him and tells him that he wants to finish high school, so that when he gets released from prison, he can have a happy life with his wife and child. Andy then assists him in passing his GED exam. Tommy goes to Red one day and asks why Andy is in jail when he is so brilliant and kind. Red informs him that he murdered his wife and her boyfriend. Hearing this, Tommy remains silent and says nothing. The next thing he knows, he's in front of Andy and Red. Tommy tells them about an interesting cellmate he previously had in another prison. The owner of the house was awakened when Tommy's cellmate broke into the house to steal. As a result, he murdered the owner and his mistress. He later discovered that the couple he murdered were not married, and the woman he murdered was the wife of a wealthy banker. Later, the authorities convicted the banker for the murder he committed. So Andy was always innocent. When Andy hears this, he rushes to Norton and tells him the story, but Norton refuses to believe him. Andy knows all of Norton's secrets since he assists him with money laundering. Andy promises Norton that he will not reveal anything about what happens inside the jail. Norton, however, interprets it as a threat and confines Andy to solitary confinement for a month. Furthermore, he invites Tommy to a talk. While Tommy hopes for Norton's assistance in helping Andy, Norton deceives by staging Tommy's escape from prison and subsequent death. Norton then goes to Andy and informs him that Tommy attempted to escape and got shot as a consequence. Andy is very aware that he is lying. He informs Norton that he will no longer be working for him. Norton then threatens to demolish the library, remove Andy's guard's protection, and relocate him to worse conditions. Andy has no choice but to give in to Norton. Andy is finally free after spending 2 months in the dungeon. Andy wonders if Red will ever be able to escape from this jail. Red claims that he will leave when he is too old and his brain stops working. Andy declares that he will leave this location and travel to Zuadneo. He describes this as a very gorgeous seaside resort in Mexico. Visitors often find themselves getting lost in the beauty of this seaside resort in Mexico. He claims that he will open a restaurant there, fix his boat on the beach, and go deep-sea fishing with his friends. Red is dubious after hearing this. He believes that hope is a harmful thing. It drives people insane. Andy now has only 2 options: live this horrible life or die. Andy tells Red to vow to do one thing for him before departing. He tells Red about a large field in Buxton with a large tree. Near that tree, there is a stone wall with a black stone on it. Andy informs Red that there is something buried beneath that stone. Andy wants Red to pledge to go to that location once he gets out of prison. Red wonders what's beneath the stone. Andy claims that he will find out when he arrives. Norton maintains all of his records in a dedicated safe after completing his assignment. Norton hands over his clothes to Andy and instructs him to iron them and polish his shoes so that they sparkle like a mirror. Andy returns to his cell after this. The following night, Red appears to be anxious because he thinks that Andy would commit suicide. Andy does not come out of his cell when the doors of all the cells open in the morning. And he is utterly taken aback as the guard approaches his cell. Norton then gets his shoebox out to put on his shoes. However, the box does not contain Norton's shoes. Andy has escaped, according to the prison guard. Norton checks Andy's cell and summons Red for questioning. Warden inquires of Red regarding Andy's location. Red responds that he doesn't know anything. Norton becomes enraged, as no one can explain how Andy fled from a prison cell without anyone noticing. He hurls a small chunk of rock at the wall poster in rage. And, to his surprise, the rock pierces the poster. Norton inserts his fingers inside the poster, curious as to where the rock went. Then he notices that Andy has dug a massive tunnel there. This takes everyone aback. Because that wall is quite sturdy, making such a tunnel without a machine is nearly impossible. But Andy did the unthinkable and went away. Following this, all of the guards ran to the side from where Andy emerged. They discover Andy's old clothes, soap, a comb, and the hammer he received from Red 20 years ago. This is the same hammer Andy has been using for the past 20 years to carve a tunnel through the wall. He kept whatever dirt came out of the wall in his pocket and spread it on the ground. When Andy left the warden, he kept all of Norton's dirty money as well as the paperwork with him. Andy wore the garments that the warden had given him to press inside his clothes, as well as the shoes that the warden had given him to polish. Andy also wore them. At night, as soon as the prison's lights were turned out, he emerged from the tunnel. After that, he burst the gutter pipe, crawled inside it, and escaped from the jail, where no prisoner has ever escaped. The next morning, Andy goes to the bank where Norton's black money is held. This money is in the name of Randall Stevens, Norton's phony business partner. Andy, in fact, utilized his sign for this imposter from jail. Andy has all of the documentation in that man's name. As a result, Andy adopts the identity of Randall Stevens and withdraws the entire cash. This sum is around $2.95 million, implying that Andy is not only free but also extremely wealthy. Andy has copies of all of Norton's black letters that he sends to the press. Norton's background in unlawful enterprise was made public in the press the next morning. When Norton opens the safe, he finds the Bible that Andy had left for him instead of his paperwork. Andy has left a message for Norton on the first page of the Bible, saying, "You were right, salvation is truly in this book." When Norton turns the page, he notices a hammer mark. Andy had cut the page into the shape of a hammer and used it to conceal his hammer. The hammer was in the same Bible when the warden initially went to Andy's cell and snatched Andy's Bible from his hands 20 years ago today. Now, Norton's entire story has been revealed. The police are on their way to arrest Norton, but he shoots himself before they arrive. After some time, Red's sentence is also commuted. He gets a job, but Red seems uninterested in the outside world because he has spent nearly 40 years of his life in prison. Red also resides in the same room as librarian Brooks, and Red likewise wishes to commit suicide. But then he remembers his vow to Andy, and he travels to that field with the enormous tree. There is a stone wall, and there is a black stone on that wall, just as Andy had described. There is a box beneath the stone when Red pulls it up. The box contains a letter and money. Andy's letter invites Red to visit the location he previously told him about. Suadnio. Andy said, "Hope is a good thing, but the best of all things and a good thing never dies." After then, Red arrives at the location, and when he approaches the seashore, he discovers Andy sitting in the boat, repairing it. This place and everything in it are Andy's dreams, which he shared with Red in jail. Perhaps the best thing in the world is hope. Andy not only built a tunnel in 20 years because of this hope, but he also received all he wanted in life.